Welcome to the show. I'm Chris Smiley. Glad to be back in studio. Glad to be back alive and well in the United States. For those of you that were following me, you know that I was in Palestine and Israel for 3 weeks covering the conflict going on there, and it was quite the experience. Palestine is a human rights disaster. I mean, it is a real tragedy what's happening there. I don't even understand how there's really a debate surrounding what's going on there. I knew about the situation before I went over there, but I don't think you can really understand what's happening until you experience certain things. So hopefully I can help people understand a little bit more of the real devastation that's going on there, the real conflict that's going on there, even though you can't maybe experience it yourself, but to be able to see some of the things that I saw, maybe it will help you understand a little bit better, to really feel the real tragedy that's happening there. And I certainly did learn a lot more than what I had known previously. I don't think we get a real good array of information in the United States and around the world. I mean, this is a conflict that's it's been going on for decades now. I shouldn't even say it's not a conflict. This is an occupation that's been going on for decades now, and the fact that it continues is just a pure tragedy. But we're going to get into a little bit of that, about what I experienced, why this is happening. So what's really frustrating to me, though, is that there is this atmosphere of debate, as I was mentioning. I just don't understand how that's even possible. I mean, people are talking about it in the American media and around the world, and especially from Israel, like this is some sort of argument with two sides of valid positions on each side, where each side has their own coherent logic, and it's kind of this clash of ideas. That's simply just not the case. This is a military occupation. In and of itself is just wrong on its face. This is not even a two-sided war at all. The Palestinians do not have an army. They do not have the weapons. They don't have this armed resistance to this occupation. I mean, what we have is just a complete control and oppression by the Israeli government, the Israeli military, upon the Palestinian people. Israel is completely in the wrong here, and there really is no point to even debating some of these other auxiliary issues if we don't first address and correct this fundamental problem of an occupation. So we're live on Jadu as well as Facebook. I'm going to go ahead and just share this as well on my page so you all can see it. I think we might be having some technical problems with our Facebook feed. Okay, give me just 1 second, guys, while I try to get this corrected. All right. Okay, there we go. Okay, so we are now live on all of our Facebook pages. Be sure to follow me as well on Facebook. I posted a lot about my trip in Palestine. So just to give you a brief overview, if you're not familiar with this conflict, the State of Israel was created from Palestinian land back in around 1940. I mean, this in and of itself is problematic when you just establish a country where other people are already living as a new state. This was actually, Palestine was actually occupied at the time by Britain, and Britain decided to mandate this new state of Israel along with other new states around it. And so there was, some obvious tension that occurred from this building of a new state between the Israelis, this new Israeli state, the Jews, and the Arab population that was already there. There were a few wars. Most important one to mention is this 1967 war, because in 1967 is when you had Israel that invaded and took over the West Bank, Gaza, and the Golan Heights, which was part of Syria at the time. And they ended up winning this war and staying in these occupied territories. So, we had this division of the West Bank and Israel. During the war, Israel invades this area. Jordan, who was fighting at the time, as well as Egypt, they pull out, they concede. So now, what we've had since 1967 is Israel has continued to occupy these lands. They never pulled out. They never left this Palestinian land. So, what we have right now is a real human rights disaster. We have Israel that's continuing to occupy this land, and what they're doing is not giving the Palestinians an equal treatment. It's becoming, and it really is an apartheid state, much like South Africa. The Palestinian people do not have the rights that the Israelis have, and they're being terrorized by the Israeli government and the military. Why are they being terrorized? I think it's pretty evident that from the actions of Israel that they do not want the Palestinians there. They want to try to take as much land from the Palestinians as possible. So while you have the Israeli military occupying this Palestinian land, they're also methodically, completely taking over sections of land, and that's what's called settlements. Israeli settlements are these communities that are Israeli Jewish only. Palestinians are not allowed to live there. They're not even allowed to go there. And you can see these all throughout the West Bank. I'll pull up a photo here of kind of what's been going on. So this was kind of just the natural progression due to this occupation and this colonization of Palestine. So more and more land is becoming under complete control of Israel, where Palestinians don't even have access to the land they used to have. So for the Palestinians that remain in the West Bank, Gaza as well, life is really harsh, it's miserable, it's controlled. One example that I think is really telling, and I just having come back from my trip, I'm pretty exhausted. I haven't been able to go through a lot of the footage, but we'll kind of just give an overview on this show today of a few things. But over the next few weeks, I'll really get into some of the wild and crazy things that I witnessed. Get into those very specifically to show you, like, really in depth of all this chaos that's happening. But today I just want to kind of give you an overview of some of the things that I witnessed. So in the city of Hebron in the West Bank, it used to be a very thriving city, and there's this one section of the street, it's called Shuhada Street, and there had been a coexistence between the Jews there and the Arabs. It was a very predominantly Arab Palestinian city, with the Jews occupying a relatively small percentage of the city. There was a massacre that happened from an Israeli Jew. An extremist Israeli Jew went into a mosque and shot and killed 29 people. And so with this chaos and this tension happening, what the Israeli government decided to do was to shut down one of the streets, one of these main streets in the city of Hebron, to the Palestinians. They completely closed off a street where Palestinians could no longer have their businesses there. They couldn't travel by cars. And this was because an Israeli had attacked Palestinians. It makes no sense, but the Israelis use any type of excuse they can, security or whatever, to take more and more from the Palestinians. So this one street, Shuhada Street, which used to be a very thriving marketplace where a number of shops existed, turned into a ghost street. And we walked through Shuhada Street. To get into just Shuhada Street from Hebron, which is still a Palestinian city, predominantly Arab, you have to go through this one checkpoint, which I'll show you here. Got to process them like that. So this is me and Mike Haynes. We're waiting to go through this checkpoint. I'll just fast forward. You can see how these people are treated like animals, where there's so many checkpoints. They have to go through these cages just to go from one street to another, which is, where these people have lived for a long time. So we went through this contraption and just to get to this street, Shuhada Street, and they have this street closed off to Palestinians. Now, Palestinians can walk through the street, but they're not allowed to drive. They're not allowed to run their businesses there anymore. And now what you're seeing is the street is really a ghost town. It used to be a very thriving marketplace, but all these shops were closed down by the Israeli government. So there's a lot of tension in Hebron due to this closure of Shuhada Street. There's even certain streets where it's Arab Palestinian only and Jewish Israelis only. So you can see the difference. One is a really torn down street, which the Palestinians are forced to walk down, and the other is just for the Israelis to walk down. I mean, quintessential apartheid status is what we're looking at. So there's a lot of issue with this historic Palestinian, and this is also from Shuhada Street. I mean, it's this zone as well as the entire area of Israel-Palestine is highly militarized. One thing that was really disturbing that I learned about going through Shuhada Street in Hebron, so where there still is Arab Palestinian shops open in the Palestinian section of Hebron, what we have is the shops on the bottom level of the street are Palestinian-owned, operated, and Israeli settlers, Israeli Jews, have taken over all of the top apartments on top of these shops. Okay, so you've got the Palestinian shops on the bottom, you've got the Israeli Jews living on top of it, and the treatment that these Palestinians get was absolutely horrific. I'm going to show you here. When you walk down this street, there you see this netting that's above you and these metal grates, and you're wondering, what the heck is all this? And you see all this trash on top of the grates. Let me pull it up here. So if you can see some of the trash and on top of these metal grates on top of the shops. What that is these Israeli settlers literally throw all of their trash on top of the Palestinian people. I mean, not just trash, they would throw their own piss and excrement on top of these people, as well as huge boulders trying to injure them. There's a lot of intense racism and hatred, and so what these Palestinian shopkeepers had to do is put up these metal grates just to protect themselves from all this trash that would be thrown down on top of them. And of course, nothing would happen. The Israelis are completely protected. Their behavior is accepted and encouraged by the Israeli government and the Israeli military. There is absolutely no retribution. There are no consequences for the horrible treatment. And what I really learned is that this racism in Israel is severe, and it's fueling this occupation. Because when you think about it, you can't treat another human being like a piece of trash. You can't, encourage others or call for the killing or occupation of another people unless you see them as subhuman. And that was one thing that I really witnessed personally. And let me show you a couple of instances of how these people are really treated and how their lives are just not worth a damn and are not valued in this society. So we, as well as Veterans for Peace. Veterans for Peace was the group I was with on this delegation. So Veterans for Peace is American military veterans that now advocate for peace, nonviolence, and so they go to different areas to show their support and solidarity, to educate and encourage others. And I was filming what they were doing. I was filming the occupation, and I'm going to have some really amazing videos to show you in the future of what we witnessed and what we went through. So in, let's see if I have it here. We went to a protest in Hebron, which I'm going to show you here. So these people were protesting a number of things. One, just the occupation in general. Two, the closure of Shuhada Street to the Palestinians. They really want to have their street back. They want to be able to open their shops back up. And so they gathered it in a peaceful protest. One thing that's also needs to be noted is that the Palestinians are completely devoted to nonviolent resistance. And that's something we witnessed. You can hear about certain terror attacks that in the news, these stabbings, but what these are very isolated incidents of just people that are extremely frustrated with their situation and lashing out. But this is not something that's coordinated. This is not something that's sanctioned by the Palestinian authorities, by the Palestinian people. They are committed to nonviolent resistance. And when you think about it, it makes sense. And they explain to us that, one, we're just a peaceful people. We don't believe in violence. And that's something that I really witnessed. These people were so welcoming, so generous. But they're also smart about this situation. They understand that they can't be violent. As much as it hurts them to sit by and watch these things happen, and as angry as they can be, they can't be violent because the Israelis will completely annihilate them and crush them. If they rise up and in armed resistance, that will give the Israelis reason to come in with their more sophisticated weaponry, their massive military, and completely crush these people. So if they want to succeed, if they want to resist this occupation, they have to do so non-violently. Otherwise, they're going to be completely annihilated by this Israeli military, which is funded, supplied by the United States government heavily. They have very sophisticated weapons, a massive military. So I'm going to play you a quick clip from this protest we went to, and I want you to see how the Israeli military, the Israeli forces treat nonviolent, peaceful protesters walking down their street, as well as internationals. I was there with a number of internationals, and I want you to see how protests are treated, how dissent is treated in Israel. So, as you can see, the Israeli forces fired upon the civilians. That was me filming, by the way. And it was a pretty scary thing to have these gas grenades flying right by our heads, these concussion grenades thrown at us. It was a very eye-opening experience. Something else I want to mention about the tear gas. So those canisters that are fired at us, those can be lethal. If it hits a person at a close enough range, it has and can kill a human being. And we've heard a number of stories about Palestinian protesters being killed by those tear gas canisters. Also, the tear gas itself, I got to say, it was probably the most pain I've ever been in my life. And I think when you hear something like tear gas, you think, oh, what, like, you get a little teary-eyed, it's something very mild, just make you cry a little bit. But this is a poisonous chemical, and what it does is it really locks up your lungs and your breathing, and it affects your eyes. And it was extremely hard for me to breathe. I mean, it felt like I was going to die when I inhaled a lot of this gas. And luckily I collapsed in the street, and luckily there was one of the Palestinians had a gas mask on and pulled me off to the side and helped me recover. But this is just everyday life for Palestinians. I mean, they get harassed and terrorized constantly. Anytime there's a protest like that, you can expect there to be violence perpetrated upon the Palestinian people. So a lot of them do wear the gas masks and these cloth bandanas around their faces because they expect it, and it happens nearly every time. Not only the gas and the grenades, but also live ammunition. A number of Palestinians have been shot during protests from live ammunition, and I didn't capture this part on film, but one of the guys, Mike Haynes, actually made it up to the front where you saw those. I don't know if you could see the Israeli soldiers. He actually was able to make it up to the front of them. He was able to get around the tear gas, and he wanted to ask them, why they're trying to prevent this protest from happening, and they raised one of the guns straight to his chest, and in a very, very dangerous the way they handle protesters in these situations. I mean, just one pull of the trigger, and my friend would have been killed. So, this is something these people have to deal with. They're not allowed to protest. After the protests, the Israelis continue to punish the Palestinians. They raid homes. They try to arrest people for any sort of charge. We actually witnessed one of these home raids, and the Israeli soldiers went into this house and they took one of the family's dogs from them, with whatever excuse. The dog doesn't have some sort of permit, just took the dog from this family. So they do this sort of thing to punish the protesters afterwards. This is something we consistently saw as we went to all of these peaceful demonstrations. Palestinians do not carry any guns. They're not foolish enough to do so. They know they'll be killed immediately. And this other protest we went to in a village called Nabi Saleh, and this village is right next to a settlement. So there's the village of Nabi Saleh, and there's this settlement, and right in between the two there's a main road, and there's also a creek. And this creek is what's kind of disputed as to who it belongs to. So typically the villagers from Nabi Saleh will go down to this creek to hold their demonstrations, hold their signs, do their chants. So we went down with them to show our support for these people. And I think what I'll show you next is really indicative of the overall feeling towards the Palestinian people, which is just completely insane. I mean, these people, are living under this extreme oppression and occupation, and they're looked at as subhuman. They're looked at as disgusting. They're treated horrifically by Israelis, not just in the military, but civilians and these settlers that live there. So I'll show you what happened. So we went over to this protest here, and let me show you what happened.
Back for lunch. I think it's better.
So right there, this guy immediately gets out of his car and hits a woman in the face and starts attacking people. So, I mean, I don't even think we were at this protest for more than 5-10 minutes when these Israelis pulled up and started assaulting people. And they can do this. They can get away with this because they're protected under this apartheid status where they are given this privileged treatment, and the Arab Palestinians are treated as animals. So these settlers, the people that live in this settlement that was built on stolen Palestinian land. They're all armed to the teeth. They had machine guns. They get there and they start hurting people. And what are the Palestinians? What are they supposed to do? They can't really fight back too much because they'll get shot and nothing will happen to the people that do that. So we had this one guy that came and just started beating women. That wasn't the only girl that got hit. There were a number of women that were assaulted, and we heard from the Palestinians. We asked them why would they do this? There's actually even more of a reason behind it than they just don't have any respect for these people. But they want to attack the women because that will make them less likely to show up. I think they were saying if you fight one of the men, they might be more likely to show up. But when you hurt a woman, it really traumatizes them, and they're less likely to come to these protests. So that's what they were saying is why these Israeli settlers were attacking these women. This is just some of the crazy violence we also experienced. Here, let me show you something else. So when we got there, this happened before that guy got out of his car and hit that woman. This guy pulled up with this car where we were holding our sign.
Excuse me, I want to go down.
And there you go, he just tries to run us over. So you see all this violence. Did anybody suffer any consequences? Nope. What happened was the Palestinians were punished. They were punished for holding this protest. The Israeli soldiers raided the village. What happens is they bring in their military vehicles and all their armed soldiers. They go into the village after the people go back to their homes. They go in, they'll try to arrest people. They end up getting into these scuffles with a lot of the kids. The kids will start throwing rocks, and then the soldiers are trying to catch them and chase them down. Something very interesting we learned is that apparently you can hit a woman in the face, but if you throw a rock, if you're a kid that throws a rock at a soldier or a vehicle, that you can be put in jail for a year. And we met a few of the kids that were put in jail for 10 months, 12 months. I think they said it's 10 months for the first time you throw a rock, 12 months the second time. It's just complete insanity what's happening in this state. I don't know really how else to describe it than just utter insanity. And so I'll be bringing to you guys over the next few weeks some of the things that I experienced, some of the crazy laws and situations that are happening in Palestine. And this oppression and this occupation is extremely important for us to stand up against, because like I was saying, these people, they can't do anything themselves. They're really constricted, and Israel is supported by the United States, which is a big reason why they're able to continue this. So a lot of us that are living in the United States, we really got to stand up against this and tell our government in the United States to stop supporting Israel, to stop supporting this occupation and this oppression that's happening, and to free these people. They deserve to have their independence. They deserve to have rights. They deserve to be able to vote. So whether we're talking about a two-state solution, meaning Palestinians will have their own government, or a one-state solution where the Palestinians will be incorporated into one large state where they're given their own rights. And that's interesting that this is something that the Palestinians are very open to. In fact, a lot of the activists are pushing for a one-state solution, which is something you might not expect. Like how could they want to live with the Israeli Jews? One, just in general, with this long history they've had, but especially as of right now with all this craziness that's happening, how could they ever expect to want to live with these people? I mean, the Palestinian people, what we found, are just so open-minded and so ready for this to end that they're willing to concede so much. They've given up so much of their land, so many of their rights. They're willing to live in peace with the Israelis, even under an Israeli government, as long as they can have equal rights, a vote, where they can be treated as human beings and not live in this abject poverty. And what we learned is that the Israelis are really afraid of pushing this one-state solution, and they want to keep hearing this two-state solution, because when you have Palestinians advocating for two states, the Israelis are able to still treat them as separate, and that they don't have to give them rights. They don't have to treat them like a member of Israel, even though they're living under the control of Israel. So it's a very horrible situation. We'll get into more about two-state, one-state, what are the solutions, BDS. I want to get some people on the air here for us to talk to, some of the Veterans for Peace that I went out there with, to share their experiences. A lot of them were really emotionally touched by this, because a number of these soldiers, these American soldiers, were occupiers themselves in Iraq, Afghanistan, and for them to go to Palestine and witness it as a civilian, it was really shocking to them. They saw a lot of the parallels from their own experience, so they have a lot of really amazing points to make and things to hear, and we'll get that to you shortly, as well as some of the people. I want to get a lot of people on this area. I've been emailing some folks from these pro-Israeli government organizations that we have here in America that are helping to fuel and sustain support for Israel in the occupation. I want to get them on the air and really ask them, why they can sit there and actively support apartheid and oppression of a population. So we're going to have some of that for you coming up soon. Feel free to send me any questions you have, and I'll try to address them on the shows, but I'm going to prepare a lot these coming weeks, a lot of the footage I shot, a lot of the information, and get it together for you to see. And I promise you it's going to be very shocking and very eye-opening, so stay tuned for that. Be sure to follow me on Facebook, Instagram to keep up with a lot of my posts about this information. And we'll see you next time on Afghanistan TV.